Hi, I'm Antonia Blythe, Senior Awards Editor. Next up, we have the new look from Apple TV. This show looks at how fashion icons Christian Dior, Coco Chanel, Pierre Balmain, and Cristobal Balenciaga survived World War II, and how they went on to launch a new era in the fashion industry. This show stars Ben Mendelsohn as Dior, Juliette Binoche as Chanel, along with Maisie Williams, John Malkovich, and Emily Mortimer. Please welcome to the stage showrunner, writer, director, and executive producer Todd A. Kessler, and executive producer Lorenzo di Bonaventura. Welcome. So before we get into talking, we're going to roll a clip.
Don't make a scene, it's not safe here.
The legend of Coco Chanel. The self-made woman, the virtuous, business savvy, do it all herself Chanel. That one is my favorite. God, if people only knew the real story. Your boyfriend is a Nazi. And you're still the little lost orphan you've always been. Or did you forget that your dad abandoned you?
I'm trying to help you to get what you want, to go home. And this is how you treat me?
Do you think you actually would have been as successful as you've been without my help?
Darling, I never needed your help.
So why did you steal my style, my talent, and pass it off
If you
as
need
your
to
own then?
fantasize that you could have achieved all that I have, you go right ahead. It came so easily to you that you never understood that real talent is turning your life into something bigger than just your life.
Magnificent. It's exactly what I dreamt it would be.
Oh, who's yelling?
You won't get away with it! Where is he? Where is our Judas?
Pierre, you cannot just come in here like this.
So this is who you are now.
What are you talking about?
How dare you? Balenciaga and I offered you a couple of her seamstresses.
Oh, we're grateful. They weren't enough.
So you stole 30 from the house of Patou. 30! And now they will never be able to make that collection.
Monsieur Balmain's seamstresses changed jobs. They needed the work, we gave it to them.
You will put Patou out of business.
We offered them work.
They had work. You showered them with more money. There's the difference. Lelon will have something to say about this.
Lelong knows I'm just trying to start my business. Did he send you?
No. I came to warn you to prepare your defense. Lelon is president of the Couture Council. He will decide your punishment.
An extraordinary time in history this was. And as we saw from these clips, not only are all these amazing icons of fashion working to change our perception of our freedom, what we can wear, how we can express ourselves in this moment, but we're also looking at such difficult areas as what was going on with the relationship with Nazis in occupied France. And as Emily Mortimer said in that moment, your boyfriend's a Nazi. And I think telling this story is an extraordinary challenge, and it's really complex. So tell us how you first came to it.
Well, I first came to the story in 1997 when I read an article about Christian Dior's 50th anniversary of launching his collection, which his first collection was launched in 1947. And it struck me just similar to what you're saying, that I knew the name Dior, but I knew nothing about him as a person. And then it opened up in doing research many years later in pursuit of trying to tell the story, looking into the time frame of the Nazi occupation of Paris, understanding that all of these designers, Coco Chanel, Christian Dior, Balenciaga, Balmain, Givenchy, Pierre Cardin, Lucien Lelong, they were all there and lived through it. And out of one of the darkest moments, certainly in the 20th century, maybe of all time, fashion and creativity led the way for bringing spirit and life back at the end of the war.
I think I was telling you both backstage about how my grandmother served in the war, and she recalls Dior's new look coming out and ordering those patterns from Paris, and how it gave all the women this new sense of hope just through his designs. It was extraordinary what he achieved. Lorenzo, tell us how you knew this story was really going to shine on the screen, and your feelings about it when you first came to it.
I think what was so spectacular about this story was every time we read a little more, it got deeper. And so that is always a good indication that you're about to tell somebody a good story, because it keeps unfolding in a way that was very complex. And I think for me, I'm not one of the people who thinks fashion is frivolous, but I'm not sure I really understood it until I got into it, in the sense of like what it meant to the people who created it, and then how it affected your mother, and that sort of notion that what is behind the experience is also part of this. We all focus on the visual aspect of it, but what's underneath that's supporting it. And so I think Adam did an unbelievable amount of research, and the more it came at us, the more the story took on these greater complexities.
Tell us about casting these extraordinary people. I mean, I just have to say that Ben Mendelsohn and Juliette Binoche they're just insanely good in these roles, and they're very complex roles. And Maisie Williams as Catherine Dior, I had no idea that she went through torture and imprisonment as part of the resistance. I mean, tell us about casting these people.
Sure. Well, casting is a huge part, and it's the first series that I've been a part of and created that's based on real people. And for me, it started with Ben Mendelsohn, because we had done a series together called Bloodline. And when Bloodline, thank you. When Bloodline ended, shortly thereafter, I live in New York, but I was in Los Angeles and met with Ben, and we're just catching up. We were actually making pizza together.
He said that you were making pizza from scratch,
yeah,
right?
We were making pizza together. And I had just started to really get into the research of Christian Dior. And so I mentioned it to him, and he said, about 40 minutes of stories that I had just read about Monsieur Dior. And Ben said, well, when you're ready, let me know, because I'll clear my schedule, and I would love to play Dior. So that's where it started. And then it took several years to be ready. Some people have asked, why is the show in English? And it's really because of that first piece of casting with Ben, because he doesn't speak French. And to me, working with an artist like Ben, similar to Juliette and Maisie, really all the actors that are on the show are super inspiring. And to go with that relationship, because it's something that we're all going to explore and learn about our lives through those characters. And Lorenzo had worked with John Malkovich on many projects, so we were able to call John, and John himself was a designer, and put out 27 fashion lines of men's clothing. So he knows what it means to be a designer. And also it was important to us to cast a French icon, to play a French icon in Coco Chanel. And when I spoke with Juliette, she was and explained the ambition of what we were trying to do. She deeply responded and has a personal history also with the war in her family. And Maisie was another piece of casting that she came in and auditioned for a different role in an earlier iteration of the series, for a different character when Catherine wasn't featured as prominently. But I was very inspired by her work in that audition, and then called her in to meet with her to play Catherine Dior, which she did so beautifully.
I think also it's a tribute to the scripts that this gentleman wrote, because almost every first choice actor that we wanted said yes, which does not happen. It just doesn't happen. So it's usually quite a tortured process, but the complexity of these characters and the depth of these characters is what attracted that cast.
Yeah, it's extraordinary the way that you approach, say, such a thorny subject as Coco Chanel's connection with the Nazi occupation. It's an extraordinarily complex scenario, and And yet, as again, we were discussing this backstage because I find it fascinating and have read biographies of Chanel, and I wondered about this. That you leave it to the audience to decide. Could you both speak to that and that decision-making process and how you wanted to do that?
Well, for us, it was very important to read as much as we could, or as much as was available. And we didn't, well, obviously, we weren't able to read everything because not everything is available to us and in English. But as much as possible to know the research and then try to construct a story out of it, which is being authentic to the history and also being entertaining. So there's certain characters that are condensed, certain things are slightly out of time, but the spirit of what we're trying to portray, I feel very confident and I'm very proud that we were able to portray it. And the type of storytelling that really excites us is to not lead the audience and tell them in this kind of story who is good and who is bad, quote unquote, but to let the audience experience the lives of the characters and the choices that they've made during such a heightened period of history of the Nazi occupation of Paris. And that you could find yourself in one episode really empathizing with Coco Chanel or Christian Dior, and then the next episode feeling very frustrated with them, but that they're complex people, and to try to show as much of that complexity as possible so that the audience can have that experience.
Yeah, this is the fourth thing I've done based on real people, and I think there's an obligation that we have to capture who they were rather than try to slot them as the villain or the good guy or whatever we want to term them as. You know, Coco in particular is obviously, you know, as you suddenly, I never knew this about her, that the Nazi connection, shall we say, and it's an interesting thing because it made us ask ourselves many questions, which is like, when you're under the pressure that they're under, they don't know that this occupation is going to end in 2 years. It could end in 50 years. So, you know, it's so easy for us to sit back and go, I would never do that, or I would only do this. And it's just not, it's not real, you know. And so the obligation is to know them as people as much as one can. You know, I don't like Coco's choices, but she's not pro-fascist. You know, they call her a sympathizer. I'd say she cavorts with the Nazis, you know. She
used them.
She exploited them at times, right, as they exploited her. So, you know, that's, I think, more interesting. You know, when you're doing fiction, what's interesting is you kind of do slot the people. That's the villain, that's the good guy, that's the. So the challenge that he faced in writing all of this is that history, and by the way, one of the things that's really important to note is every event in there happened. We don't know what they said there, but when you get to know them, you get to understand kind of who they are. You know, even in one of the most crazy things is some files were sealed off from the Nuremberg trial for forever, and they came out during the research. And so suddenly we got information that didn't exist anywhere else out there.
What was the information that you got?
It was her relationship with General Schellenberg.
With Walter Schellenberg.
Yeah.
And we weren't able to put it in entirely in the first season, but we would, you know, hopefully moving forward. And it's, I mean, it's so complex and fascinating, and there's so much to read. There are books that are published that one particular that comes to mind is called The Secrets of Chanel No. 5. And even if, sorry, I'm not, it's just super exciting to come across that history and to know that Chanel No. 5 is named No. 5 because it was the 5th sample of 22 samples that she had created, and had used more jasmine in the perfume than anyone had ever used, and everyone told her it would be a failure, but obviously it was not a failure. Those kind of details are really exciting to come across.
Well, that leads me to, what are your hopes exactly for a second season?
Well, the hopes are that we're able to tell more of the story, because the first season really gets us in the Dior story to his starting line. He launches his first collection at the end of the season. It's an overnight success. The character that Glenn Close plays, named Carmel Snow, who's the fashion editor at Harper's Bazaar at the time, looks at the collection and says to Monsieur Dior, well, Christian, you've created such a new look. And that basically was a shot heard around the world in a good way. and catapulted to Dior to overnight worldwide success. And so it ended up being a 10-year run of success, and the second season for Christian Dior tells that success. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a spoiler, but he died 10 years after the opening of his house, and he was 52. But he had handed off his fashion house to a 21-year-old man that he had hired when he was 19, who everyone told him not to hire, and that was Yves Saint Laurent, who also went on to have a bit of a career.
What a story.
And that's exciting to bring a new important character into it.
Lorenzo, I'll let you wrap it up with the moment you're most proud of so far in this project.
That's such a hard question. The thing I think I'm most proud of is that when we have talked to the people who have worked at Dior for 50, 60 years, like when you're working with them, they literally talk about Monsieur Dior as though he is right next door, and like they saw him yesterday. And to hear the approval that we got from them was incredible, you know, and people that worked with him for literally his entire existence as a fashion designer, and then 50 years plus at the House of Dior. So that was really gratifying when the people who lived it said thumbs up.
I mean, that's the best accolade you can get, isn't it? Well, congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to more.